Hello and welcome to the Business of Property podcast. I'm Stuart.
And I'm Simon.
We're both property people running our own businesses, and this podcast is just us chatting every Wednesday, as we often do, about anything and everything property. Now, before we get into the episode, I just want to say we know we've got a number of listeners and we thank you all for listening. But please get your thumbs out and leave us at least a rating, preferably a rating and review, because not enough of you have done that. So please do that. Just help us spread the message. It'll be awfully well received by us, and we might even give you a shout out if we feel that way inclined. But back to this week's episode. And Simon, we were just going to have a bit of an update session. And the last time we spoke with you, you were just preparing for potentially a new tenant, sorting out a rental property that had been rented for some time.
Yep. I had a fairly long-term set of tenants who'd been there for a couple of years or so. Gave me notice and moved out. They moved on to elsewhere. Actually, they were a group of sharers and they all split up and all went in different directions. But that happened, and I had a bunch of repairs to do and reletting process, and that didn't entirely go smoothly. But I think we're going to dig into that in more depth in a future episode, probably. We'll see. But it is done. I have new tenants. They've moved in. It's all completed. Hopefully they haven't turned it into a cannabis farm. Hopefully they are actually moved in with their children as expected and living there nicely now. So yeah, I'm very, very pleased to say that is done for the time being, and they haven't reported any problems yet. So yeah, my tenants are good. How about your tenants, Stuart? Because when we last spoke about updates, you had just changed the letting agent you were using for a number of your rooms that you were having a little bit of trouble getting tenants for. And you said on that episode that by the time we have another updates episode, you thought you'd be telling us that all of those rooms are full. So, Stuart, are they full?
Yes, they are.
Congratulations.
And that was news to you as well. It was live and direct on this show. Yeah. The new agent has been phenomenal in terms of getting bums on beds, as we say. And it just shows that you need to get the right people for the right... It's like having the right tools for the right job, isn't it? I'm not denigrating the previous letting agent. I think they're very good, very professional people from my limited experience with them. However, I think they were more residential. I don't think they were really for the room by room. And the new agent filled those 3 rooms within 7 days. In fact, wow. there was some serendipity. They got a group of 3 and we were looking for 3 people. But it just goes to show me that the property was finished on the 3rd of March, and the previous agent had the property. I think I showed them around the property back in January, and we were still looking for those 3 rooms, as you say, on that episode. So they'd had a good few months to fill those 5 rooms, and the agent that I then selected they've already filled 2 rooms out of 3 on a project we hadn't completed, which we talked about as well on the podcast. So I was very confident that. Which is why I made that such a bold statement that by this episode we would have done that, and they have. So that was positive on that front. I actually thought you were going to ask me about the other tenants that were. So we're selling 2 houses, and we've got the other end of the problem where we've got tenants that are going to stay that we don't really want to be there.
Ah, those ones, yes. So actually, that leads quite nicely into some of your other updates. Actually, I'm going to not go into your other updates yet, because despite the excellent setup you provided there, I want to talk a bit more about HMO rooms and finding tenants for them. Because I think finding 3 tenants, and yes, it was lucky that they came as a group of 3, but even so, finding 3 tenants in 7 days, that's pretty good going, I think, especially in the current market, where HMO rooms are perhaps a little bit softer on demand than they have been. Do you know what the new agents did differently? Is it that they've got sort of pre-existing contacts into the sharers out there somehow? Sort of a list of people already looking for places, or was it advertising differently? Or I don't know. I'm going to stop guessing. What did they do differently?
They had different channels, so they were using different channels, and that was, we discussed this on the previous podcast around the fact that the other agent was just using Rightmove, I believe, not and maybe the main channels, but not using things like Spare Room or Gumtree. I'm not sure if that was one that was used, but do you know the biggest thing for me was that the new agent just applied a significant amount of desire to get those rooms filled personally. So I know that the agent is aware that I have a number of rooms in the area, and we'd had challenges in the past, speaking quite candidly, and we'd had significant, let's say, heated debates. Some might call them arguments, but we'd had heated debates. However, we'd gotten through that, and as a gesture of goodwill, I said, look, here's a property for you. If you're able to do this, then let's talk again about what else we've got. And I have to say that he has approached it with absolute gusto. But to answer your question directly, and this just shows me that it's largely about desire and application as well as the channels he uses. That he went back through, I'm going to say back through his Rolodex, which just makes me sound really old. But I'm sure a lot of people know what I'm talking about. But he just went back through all of the contacts that he'd had in the past that were looking for places. And the three guys that he found for the property were actually looking for a house. So they wanted a house together. And he went back to them and just said, look, it's not a house, it's a house share. There's going to be two other fellas there that you'd share with. He said, but I think you should have a look because it's really unique, because this is the one where we've done all the artwork and all the brickwork and everything else. So he said, why don't you just come along and have a look? And obviously they went and had a look, sold it in because it is such a good property. And they said, yeah, actually. And, so they're already getting on. And the funny thing is I'm now getting requests for, can we please put a hot tub in the garden? Just to close this story down, I said no very quickly. But the point being is that clearly they're gelling as a group already in that property, which is That's great. Good. Yeah. So I think they used different channels, but it was a fact that he had just had this desire to get those rooms filled. And I don't know what the previous agent did or didn't do, but what I know is that they weren't going back through the records and looking for it. And given that I'm pretty confident that this agent would have filled those rooms back in February before we'd even finished, has led me to look at, okay, in the future now, if I'm looking at residential, I'll use this agent. If I'm looking at house share with this type of property where we've gone premium, I'll use this agent. And then I've got other properties where I'd probably use a slightly different agent because I know they have a really good access into the workers market, aside from professionals. So I think that was a real big learning for me.
Yeah. Did you manage to achieve the rents you wanted?
Yes. Yeah. It's I haven't got the numbers handy, but if I think about what that property was renting for this time last year, we were getting roughly, I think it was around 1,000, 1,200, which was pennies for the property that it was. But as talked about on other episodes, it was the fact that the property needed a little bit of upkeep, not much. I mean, we'd refurbed it back in 2015, but the tenant profile had dipped. But we've doubled that now, so we are roughly, it's roughly generating 2.5K. So it's more than doubled the rent, the gross rent.
Wow, that's an excellent result.
It is. I mean, we've spent significant sums on it, so it didn't come for free. We knocked through, created 5 en suites. As we talked about it previously, but so the significant funds spent on it, but that's what we wanted to do, and that is now the flagship property.
Wow, that's all excellent news and fantastic that they're full, and the rent level you were looking for, and you've massively increased the income from that property, obviously from investing money into it. But yeah, that's all fantastic news. So, shall we move on to the slightly more difficult updates?
Well, the difficult updates have gotten better. So one of the tenants who wasn't making any signs to move at all, but I started booking in or scheduling in appointments to go in and have a look at the property because this particular tenant had gone MIA and was no longer responding to texts. But because I was then scheduling, because I just wanted to kind of look at the standard of the property, make sure things were being fixed. Because of that, I think the tenant then messaged me and we had a conversation. I just said, look, if you're having problems, please just keep open lines of communication. And I was quite honest and just said that, because if you're worrying about it, if you're having worries, talk to me, because I'm going to help you solve them. And if you're not talking to me, the problem's only going to get worse. But anyway, so although we don't have a date for her leaving and that property is being purchased, I feel that we're getting closer. And at least I've got an open line of communication. The more interesting one, I think, for sharing is that the studio flat we're selling, so this is the one we had a short-term let that was agreed as such, verbally discussed as such, paperwork signed as such. Let's put the legalities aside. Then seemed to be going down the legal route, because this person then contacted the council, and the council then told us, well, no, you can't evict someone. And my response was, we don't want to. But we did reach out to the tenant and just expressed our surprise and disappointment that, given all of the conversations we'd had about it being a short-term let, that the tenant then wanted to stay in for a long term. The good news is, very recently, we spoke with the tenant, we just booked things in, and the tenant agreed to move out. And we were due to exchange on that property 2 days after that event. And most of that was because...
that was cutting it a bit fine.
Cutting it very fine. And the buyer, bearing in mind we've had this buyer for a few months now, the buyer was quite insistent. Well, firstly, the property had to be empty on exchange, because that was the agreement for what we had. You can obviously make agreements for tenants to stay, but that requires a whole different set of paperwork. The tenant the buyer obviously then wanted to come and see the property, which we said is fine. The buyer had also ensured that we'd run an electrical report. Anyway, 2 days before exchange, I got a call from one of the neighbours who said, I've just found out that you're going to sell your property. And I said, well, it's due for exchange in 2 days. So I'm sorry, it's off the market, because this neighbour was quite interested in buying it. The day before exchange, and as of this recording, we need to see where it pans out. But the day before exchange, we had a note via the solicitor that said that the buyer's solicitor wanted the ground rent capped at £1,000 per annum. Now, the current ground rent is £150, and it doubles every 25 years. So by 2093, it will be over that figure, because it will be £1,200. Now, I know some people are quite meticulous and want to cover all angles, but I don't know about you or anyone else listening. In 2093, I'm not sure how concerned I would be, given the rate of inflation, about that £1,200.
Right, so let's work this out. You've got £150, and what are we going to assume? Rate of inflation of 2% a year?
Let's just go for that, yeah.
Yeah, and that's 93 is 70 odd years from now?
Yep.
Okay, so just increasing 150 quid by inflation, assuming it's consistent the whole time, that works out about 600 quid. So 1,200 quid is kind of double the rate of inflation, or rate of probable likely inflation. So maybe. However, I think their concerns are probably a bit misplaced, because I think leasehold is going through a lot of reform at the moment, or is in the next 5 to 10 years, it is going to go through a lot of reform. And I think ground rents, certainly doubling ground rents, are probably going to be a thing of the past by then anyway. So yeah. I don't think they really need to worry about it from that point of view. If it was doubling every 5 years or every 10 years, like some of the really bad sounding recent ones, then maybe you'd have a concern. But 25 years?
Well, lenders apparently have a bigger issue with it. If it's under 10 or 15, and this is probably noteworthy for anyone listening, if you've got a ground rent which doubles more frequently than 10 and 15 years, so anything from 0 to 15, mortgage companies may well have an issue with it. But what you've just said is absolutely right. And this was kind of, as I said to you before we recorded, my first reaction to this was they're looking for a reason not to buy. Now, why? And I've seen this before, where something will be found where they go, okay, this is the reason we don't need to buy. Of course, we're going to respond. We have responded to all of these points, and the one that you mentioned. Okay, fine, yeah, it isn't reasonable then if we say, okay, if it reasonably would be expected to have increased to £600 and it's £1,200, okay, it's £600 more in 72 years' time. However, one of our points back via the solicitor was there is a lot of change happening on leasehold right now. So in 72 years, there may not be such a thing as leasehold, number one, or it may look very different. And in fact, the rights may well have changed. So, and then the final point that our solicitor said was, to try and just get this over the line, he said that you can get an indemnity policy to protect future lenders at £33, and I assume that's per annum. So at a minimal cost, one could protect oneself with £33. So I feel that we've now just sort of thrown it all over the fence. But as we record today, we don't know where this is going to wash out. So this is one to watch for us.
It seems like a bit of a strange request as well from a buyer to you as the seller, because you can't control it. You're not the freeholder. You can't set the ground rent and the rules as well. So it seems such a strange
but that's
request.
why the cynic in me says that this is for reasons of actually I need a reason to pull out, and this is one versus just coming out and saying, do you know what, I've changed. We've changed our minds. We don't want to buy.
Yeah. How long's left on the lease?
Oh, I extended it a couple of years ago. So it's probably 120. It's probably around 200, something like that.
Okay. So yeah, it goes way beyond that time anyway. So
yeah,
they haven't got other issues first.
The irony is, and the reason I mentioned about the neighbour, because the neighbour phoned me the day before this all happened and said, I'm quite interested in buying your house. And I said, I'm really sorry, we're about to exchange. And then the next day we get this bombshell. So, and I tried to explain to my wife. So my wife, we really thought, we actually she went through quite a lot of stress, and we went through stress. I mean, I kind of accept it as what we do. But to get to a point where we didn't know the tenant was actually going to leave the property. We just didn't. We just said, we're going to check you out and we'll be there on this day at this time. We weren't sure whether if we got there, the door would just be shut and she'd be inside and says, go to the council or not. So to get there and to actually be able to check someone out was a big relief. We get that relief. And then, on the one hand, you go, oh, good. Okay, we've got an empty property again because we weren't sure if she was going to stay another 6 months. And then all of a sudden, we're not sure the sale's going to proceed.
Yeah, it's just typical, isn't it? You put all that effort into dealing with the tenant and helping them work out what they're doing and making the right decision in that expectation that you're then going to have a sale to progress. And then suddenly it's all up in the air again. It's, so frustrating.
As I said to my wife, welcome to property.
Yep, it does seem to be that way, doesn't it? It's one thing after another.
It is.
As we'll talk about at some point in the future, I think when we come back to my recent maintenance. But have you got any other updates to bring in, or could we just maybe finish this episode on time?
I think that was it in terms of updates. We are selling another property, which, touch wood, is going through the conveyancing process again. Just waiting for updates. The buyer has had their valuation, so I'm just waiting to hear back to ensure that that's agreed with our selling price, as we know that can be variable. But yes, other than that, we are fully up to date, I believe.
Fantastic. Do you have an EWS1 form for your Croydon flat yet?
No, we do have 3 quotes. The managing agent has 3 quotes for the EWS1 form, ranging from, actually, I probably can't say that, but we have quotes. And when I say they have quotes. So we are now waiting for them to select a quote and instruct the work. So we don't know if we are going to be waiting 3 months, 6 months, a year. I'm trying to get another investor to provide the capital, because we're still on the bridge on that one, actually. Fortunately, the bank hasn't been putting a lot of pressure on us on that. And we have tenants in there. So there's a little less pressure on it. But if the bridging lender wants to start applying pressure, things could get a bit choppy.
And just on, I know you don't want to name specific values for those quotes, but I am curious. Are they sort of hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands? What does it cost to get an EWS1 form? Just ballpark.
Yeah, we're talking about single-digit thousands to the mid between 10 and 20s.
Wow, it's quite a big range and quite expensive.
It is a big range, and my feeling will be that the price will be dependent on the expedience to which they could do the survey. So
yeah,
I would imagine if they can do it sooner, they're charging the big bucks versus, we can do it in roughly 2023. That's that would be £1,500, please, sir. But the other nice side note on that one is we did reach out to. So I mentioned again previously that there's 20 flats in the building, which is a mixed commercial and resi, and 10 of those are owned by the managing agent, but 10 are independent landlords like me and my company. And we reached out to 10 of those people. 3 of them have responded. So we're trying to get a little collective together, because aside from the fact that we could all just sit in a virtual room and swear about our experiences with the current managing agent, hopefully there'll be some more persuasiveness in numbers if a few of us can just get together and even collectively just start emailing, writing letters and so on.
Yep, strength in numbers. It's could be worth trying.
Yeah.
Cool. Shall we finish up for this time then?
Yes. So for everyone listening, as per usual, everything will be on thebusinessofproperty.com. Please do leave us a rating or review. It really will help to get the message out and support the show. If you're getting value from it, and if you're listening now, then hopefully you are. And other than that, we will see you next Wednesday.